So normally I do book reviews or talk about D&D or other tabletop gaming, but today I'm going to talk about Anachronox because I played through it and a few people were curious about the game. As I would do with the book review, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what is Anachronox as a concept, right? It was a game released in 2001 by Tom Hall and what was then Ion Storm. Looking online, it looks like Square now has the rights to it. At least they're selling it on the Square Enix store, so if you're looking for it, you can find it there, Steam, wherever. Moving on, I was going to try and talk a little bit about the development process, how it came about, because there's a really great story there. And then I learned that, Vice already told that story, and they've got a really great article about it, and all I would end up doing is reading that to you guys, and that seemed a waste of everyone's time. So I'll put the link to the Vice article somewhere where you can find it, and then if you're interested, go read that. But what else was happening in 2001? This was the year of Final Fantasy X, Metal Gear Solid 2, Baldur's Gate 2, Shenmue 2. Might sense a theme here, but the point is that if you were playing games on anything but the PC, you had a lot of things coming at you. There were a lot of reasons that you would miss Anachronox, especially since it only released on PC. So, what is Anachronox? When we get to talk a little bit about the mechanics of the game, you'll see that it's a love letter to the JRPG genre. It was made by people who are very familiar with how that genre should be paced, should be experienced, the game mechanics of it, but it's also definitely a light in tone game. If we had to compare it to one of the Final Fantasies, closer to 5 than any of the others, because there is a serious through line about saving the universe, but it's tongue-in-cheek, and the game is going for a fun tone more than a serious or somber or thoughtful tone. So, one thing that I generally say whenever you have a game with a party, knowing who joins you is sort of important. We're going to start with our main character, Sly Boots, private detective. You may not be able to read it because the 2001 era graphics are very, very 2001. He starts the adventure, as most JRPG-style protagonists do, very small-scale story. He owes a mobster money and would like to no longer owe a mobster money. So he goes out to try and fix his life's problems, and he meets this guy, Grumpos, who hires him to escort him to find something called Mystech. Think of Mystech as materia, espers, magical stones, whatever you want. That's essentially what Mystech is. And also joining Boots on his journey are his robot friend Pal 18, who can hack computers for you and shoot people with lightning. Dr. Ro Bowman, a scientist who is incredibly smart about Mystech, can analyze technology for you, and brings you the shuttle that lets you go to different planets. Speaking of planets, your next party member is Democritus, who is a planet. And you may not be able to tell on these wonderful 2001 graphics, but he's got two little space stations that look like googly eyes, so that's like eye lasers. You also are joined by your old partner in well, I guess solving crime, not partner in crime, Stiletto, as well as a superhero who, as you could tell, would have felt out of place if we didn't also have a robot and a planet on the team. If that doesn't give you a feel for what I meant when I said that this is a very fun tone for the game, hopefully now you get what we're saying. Mechanically, the game's not that difficult. It's also fairly simple. Here's a combat screen. If you've ever played a JRPG before, this looks very, very familiar. You've got, oh hey, I do have my cursor showing, good. You have your hit points here, your mana bar, your limit gauge this time, builds up, use tier 1, 2, 3, 4 skills, and here you have your ATB. Nothing new, nothing exciting, very straightforward, very simple, And that's all a game like this needs. It doesn't need anything super complicated. They did try to do one new thing with this Elementor system, which essentially is a build your own materia. You take these bugs, you drop them in, try to build patterns to maximize output, feed bugs these leaves to make bugs stronger, up your power, up your harmony to make better magic. All of that sounds too complicated for you? Fine, I ignored it completely and made it through the game just fine using the magic the game gives you or that you can buy. You can ignore it. I would recommend ignoring it because getting the bugs, feeding the bugs is time consuming and you don't need it. One thing to give you an idea of when I say that the team that made Anachronox knew what they were doing and cared, in the finale, you get to use all of your characters. So many games these days, by the end of the game, it looks like they're running out of both time and caring. So little things like remembering you have an entire team that you should involve in the finale get forgotten. So this is just one of the little things that I think show that while making Anachronox, they cared about. One other thing that I guess I would like to mention is that you can also tell that they were very familiar with games like Final Fantasy VII or Chrono Trigger, because throughout the game you're also going to get weird side tangents. There's a rail shooting segment, a few arcade-like driving and dodging sections, and you can skip them. Like, if you fail, you get an option to just skip, let's pretend we succeeded. So if you don't enjoy those sections, you can ignore them entirely. But again, for what was a 2001 game made on a budget and a prayer, those sections actually work. They're a little aged, but the point is just an example of something that shows they knew what they were doing throughout. One of the other things that shows they understood their design and their vision, besides the tightness of the script and the consistency and tone in the script, is that they put little things like this in the background to make the world of Anachronox feel a little more real, which they didn't really have to, right? For 2001, this could have just been a blob on the background that looked kind of like a vending machine and let us fill in the gaps. They didn't need to come up with a Snacronox to make it feel like this is a part of the world, right? It could have just been background detail, but this little detail here helps give an idea of the sort of thing you're going to experience in the game. And then I think when I mentioned we have a superhero, they don't just ignore how that would impact the world. We get a whole section that builds that out. Here's just some of the 2001 era graphics that didn't age too badly. Maybe the one in the front is a little more blurry, but these two in the back, not the greatest if you were to compare it to stuff today, but you can see that it's pretty well defined. There's a lot of detail. So again, even though it's 2001, they're doing a lot with what they had. And then here's just some more random enemies to give you an idea of the art style that you're going to deal with. So overall, I feel as though, I could pretty solidly recommend Anachronox if this is the genre of game you enjoy. It is very much a genre game, though. There's not too much to... If you weren't going to like it from what I've described and you pick it up, there's nothing in here that's going to change your mind. Either you want to play a game like Final Fantasy VII or Chrono Trigger, and that's what you want to play is a game pretty much that, but maybe in space. That's the only real difference you're hoping for. Then that's this. If you're looking for something more complicated, more in-depth, this game doesn't have a bunch of subsystems. Even the statistics that you see, they don't give you really solid numbers. They range from poor to excellent, and you just sort of have to guess numerically what that means. But because the game's not that difficult, doesn't really matter if you don't know exactly what your hit rate is or any of that. You can just sort of ignore and abstract that out, and you'll be fine. Overall, final thoughts, I think people should give Anachronox a try. It's kind of a shame we never got any more from this same tone and feel, but maybe someday it will get out of whatever rights issues or whatnot that it's in, and we might get something else like this again that maybe has a little more time to take the systems that they wanted to use and flesh it out more. So there you go. That's Anachronox from 2001, and I'll put a more detailed write-up somewhere, as well as the link to the Vice article. So there we are, Anachronox.